Sunita, a quiet farmer's wife with a hidden past, and Ramesh, her unsuspecting husband, sat down to a Valentine's Day dinner that would end in tragedy, unveiling a shocking tale of love, betrayal, and poison in a small Indian village. It was February 14, 2018, a warm evening in a small farming village in Haryana, India. The day had been ordinary for Ramesh, a man in his early 40s who had spent most of his life working the fields, plowing the land, and tending to the crops. He was known as a quiet and hardworking farmer, respected in the village for his dedication and for the modest but steady life he provided for his family. That night, however, something unusual awaited him at home. His wife, Sunita, had prepared a special dinner, something she rarely did with such effort. In their rural household, celebrations like Valentine's Day were not common, but Sunita had gone out of her way to set the table, cook his favorite dishes, and create an atmosphere that neighbors later described as surprisingly cheerful. The aroma of spiced lentils, vegetables, and fresh bread filled the air. Neighbors passing by remembered hearing faint sounds of music from the house and even catching bits of laughter drifting from the open windows. For a moment, the home seemed filled with warmth and celebration, a rare display of affection in a household where life was usually dictated by work and routine. Ramesh, tired from his long hours in the fields, sat down to eat, grateful for what seemed like an unexpected gesture of love. But within hours, everything changed. That same night, Ramesh began to feel sick. His stomach cramped violently, and he complained of dizziness. Villagers later recalled that around midnight, they heard unusual noises from inside the farmhouse, as if someone was stumbling or struggling. By the time dawn broke, Ramesh was lying lifeless. The sudden death shocked the entire community. To those who knew him, Ramesh had been a healthy, strong man, not one to fall ill so quickly. Some assumed it was a case of bad food or sudden illness, but others quietly began to question how a man could die so suddenly after a simple meal. The morning after, whispers spread through the village. Neighbors who had heard the laughter and smelled the food just hours before now stood in disbelief outside the farmhouse, watching as officials arrived. The air that had carried the aroma of spices the night before was now filled with suspicion and unease. What seemed like a romantic Valentine's dinner had ended in tragedy, and though no one could yet explain why, the unsettling thought lingered in everyone's minds, that Ramesh's death was no accident. Something far darker had unfolded behind those closed doors. As the village prepared for Ramesh's funeral, police officers quietly opened an investigation. The initial autopsy results revealed something far more sinister than food poisoning. There were traces of pesticide in Ramesh's stomach, the kind commonly used in farming to protect crops. This discovery shocked investigators, turning what looked like a sudden illness into a suspected case of deliberate poisoning. Detectives soon began searching through Ramesh's home for clues, hoping to uncover anything that might point to a motive. What they found hidden in a wooden box beneath Sunita's clothes would change the direction of the case entirely. Inside the box were carefully folded letters, tied together with an old ribbon. The handwriting was not Ramesh's. The notes were addressed to Sunita, written by a man named Arjun, a farmer from a nearby plot of land. The tone of the letters was intimate, filled with words of affection and longing. They spoke of secret meetings in the fields, stolen moments near the riverbank, and promises of a future where the two could live together openly. The letters revealed a hidden side of Sunita's life that no one in the village had suspected. The investigation soon uncovered that Sunita and Arjun had been seeing each other in secret for over a year. Their affair had grown stronger over time, fueled by a mix of passion and frustration. Ramesh was known to be stern, and while he provided for his family, his marriage was not one of romance or warmth. To outsiders, Sunita appeared to be a dutiful wife, but the letters painted a different picture. They revealed a woman who felt trapped in a life she did not choose, longing for escape and freedom with her lover. What disturbed investigators most was not only the romantic tone of the letters, but the hints of desperation scattered within them. Phrases about a life without obstacles and a future without fear suggested that Ramesh's presence stood in the way of their plans. Though no letter openly mentioned murder, the underlying message was clear. Sunita and Arjun were dreaming of a life where Ramesh no longer existed. When police questioned neighbors, some admitted they had noticed Sunita and Arjun speaking quietly near the fields on more than one occasion, but no one thought much of it at the time. In hindsight, those small moments became troubling pieces of a larger puzzle. The discovery of the letters turned suspicion firmly toward Sunita, and for the first time, investigators began to believe that the Valentine's Day dinner had been part of a calculated plan rather than a loving gesture. The investigation began to gather momentum when a woman from the neighboring house decided to come forward with what she had seen on the evening of February 14. She recalled noticing Arjun near the farmhouse just before sunset. His presence there struck her as unusual because he had no reason to be around Ramesh's property at that hour. At first, she dismissed it as coincidence, but when she learned of the sudden poisoning, the memory took on new weight. Her statement gave the police a crucial thread to pull on, linking Sunita's lover to the scene of the crime. Further inquiry revealed another suspicious detail. On the very day of Ramesh's death, Sunita had been seen purchasing pesticide from a local shop. When asked about it, she insisted that she bought it for killing rats in the storeroom. The excuse sounded reasonable at first, but investigators could not ignore the fact that the same substance was later found in Ramesh's body. The timing was too exact and the explanation too convenient. The police also examined Sunita's phone records, uncovering late-night calls exchanged between her and Arjun. Some calls lasted nearly an hour, and one had taken place just hours before Ramesh's final meal. The frequency and timing of these calls painted a picture of two people constantly in touch, perhaps planning something beyond their secret affair. Though the content of the conversations remained private, the pattern was undeniable and troubling. The villagers who had initially mourned with Sunita began to shift their opinions as these details surfaced. The community, bound by traditions and closely knit relationships, felt betrayed by what seemed to be a calculated deception. Sunita, once seen as a quiet and dutiful wife, was now spoken of in hushed voices as a woman capable of betrayal and violence. The idea that she might have prepared a poisoned meal for her husband on a day celebrated for love and devotion unsettled everyone. Yet, despite the growing mountain of suspicion, the case remained built on circumstantial evidence. The testimony of a neighbor, the pesticide purchase, and the late-night phone calls created a narrative of guilt, but none of these proved beyond doubt that Sunita had slipped poison into the food. For investigators, the challenge was clear. Suspicion was strong, but the direct link between Sunita's actions and Ramesh's death still needed to be established. The mystery of how much Arjun was involved, and whether the plan was shared between them or carried out by Sunita alone, kept the case wide open. When police finally brought Arjun in for questioning, the atmosphere grew tense. Investigators hoped that pressing him would reveal cracks in his story, but he remained calm and distant. He admitted to knowing Sunita well, but denied any involvement in Ramesh's death. He argued that their relationship was nothing more than casual companionship, and insisted that he had no reason to harm Ramesh. Still, the evidence of the letters and the late-night calls contradicted his statements. His refusal to explain why he had been seen near the farmhouse on the night of February 14 raised more doubts, but legally, silence was not enough to prove guilt. Detectives tried to match the pesticide found in Ramesh's body with any evidence that Arjun had purchased or handled it. They found nothing. No receipts, no witnesses, no traces on his property. Without a direct link, their suspicion hung in the air without solid ground. The prosecution wanted to build a case that showed Arjun was not just a bystander, but an active participant in a conspiracy. Yet every time the investigation pushed toward him, the evidence seemed to stop short, as if he had carefully avoided leaving behind any proof. Meanwhile, Sunita was questioned repeatedly, but she displayed an unsettling composure. While others might have broken down under pressure, she maintained a steady, almost emotionless presence. She did not cry during interrogations or express anger when accused. Her calm demeanor frustrated investigators who believed she had carefully thought through every step of the plan. It was as if she had rehearsed her answers, leaving no room for mistakes. This composure convinced many officers that Sunita had been the mastermind, with or without Arjun's help. The relationship between the two lovers became the central focus of the case. Were they plotting together, or had Sunita acted alone in desperation? Arjun's silence suggested caution, but it also hinted at knowledge he did not want to reveal. Some investigators believed he manipulated Sunita into committing the crime, whispering ideas of freedom and a life together, while carefully keeping his own hands clean. Others argued that Sunita had grown tired of her marriage and used Arjun's affection as justification for carrying out her own plan. By the time questioning ended, the case was stuck in a gray area. The evidence against Sunita was strong but circumstantial, and the evidence against Arjun was almost non-existent. The line between accomplice and innocent lover blurred, leaving behind a story full of suspicion, but without the certainty needed to deliver clear answers. The trial that followed became the talk of Haryana and beyond. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse, eager to catch a glimpse of the woman accused of turning Valentine's Day into a day of death. Inside, the prosecution laid out its case with determination. They argued that Sunita had poisoned her husband in cold blood, planning the act carefully so that it looked like a tragic accident. The hidden love letters, the suspicious purchase of pesticide, the phone records, and the neighbor's testimony were presented as a chain of evidence that revealed both motive and method. The story was one of betrayal, a wife seeking to remove her husband in order to build a future with another man. The defense, however, tried to dismantle this picture. They claimed the pesticide could have entered the food accidentally, as it was commonly stored in farming households. They pointed out that no one had witnessed Sunita actually adding poison to the meal. They also argued that the love letters, though intimate, did not prove she had murderous intent. Instead, they described her as a lonely woman trapped in a harsh marriage, who sought comfort in friendship with a neighbor. Without direct evidence, the defense urged the court to avoid convicting her based only on suspicion. Arjun, who had been painted as the shadowy figure behind the scenes, was never formally charged due to the lack of hard evidence. His presence near the farmhouse remained unexplained, but without proof, the court could not tie him to the poisoning. Many in the village believed he had orchestrated the crime while keeping himself safe from the law, but legally he walked away untouched. Sunita, on the other hand, faced the full weight of the allegations. After months of hearings, the verdict was delivered. Sunita was found guilty of murdering her husband and sentenced to life in prison. She stood silent as the judgment was read, her face expressionless, offering no final words or signs of regret. The villagers were divided. Some saw her as a cold-blooded killer who sacrificed her husband for love, while others whispered that she was a pawn in a larger plan, abandoned by her lover once the crime was done. Years later, the case still lingers in the memories of those who followed it. The official version says Sunita acted alone, but the unanswered questions about Arjun's role keep the story alive. Was he truly uninvolved, or did he influence the plan from the shadows? The truth remains uncertain, leaving behind a mystery that continues to haunt the village every Valentine's Day.